The morning sun had barely begun to color the marble rooftops of Athens when you discovered that your new job was not heroic, respected, or even particularly useful in the traditional sense. In fact, if anyone had described it to you a year earlier, you would have laughed and assumed they were joking. Yet here, you stood in the center of one of the greatest civilizations in history, holding a wooden board covered in small pottery fragments, while a crowd gathered around you with surprising enthusiasm. Ancient Greece is remembered for philosophers discussing the nature of reality, mathematicians uncovering the secret of numbers, and generals shaping the fate of nations. What history rarely mentions is that someone had to organize the chaos of ordinary life. And sometimes those responsibilities were far stranger than anyone expected. Your task today involved names, arguments, and a level of public drama that would make modern reality television seem calm by comparison. Citizens approached one after another, scratching names onto small pieces of broken pottery called ostraca. Some looked serious, others amused, and a few appeared far too excited for a process that could determine another person's future. You collected each fragment carefully while pretending not to notice the growing tension. One man confidently submitted a name, then immediately spent 10 minutes explaining why everyone else should do the same. Another submitted a name, forgot who he had written, and asked if he could have his pottery piece back. Democracy, you were learning, was not always elegant. By midday, the pile of pottery fragments had become enormous. Every citizen seemed to have an opinion, and every opinion seemed to involve removing someone from public life. The process was called ostracism, and while modern people often imagine ancient democracy as a noble gathering of thoughtful minds discussing complex issues, the reality sometimes resembled a citywide popularity contest with significantly higher stakes. If enough votes accumulated against a person, they could be exiled for years, not executed, not imprisoned, just politely informed that everyone would prefer if they lived somewhere else for a while. Your role was to count, organize, and verify the votes. Simple in theory, exhausting in practice, especially when half the population appeared incapable of writing clearly. By the time the sun reached its highest point, you had developed a deep personal hatred for messy handwriting. Philosophers debated the meaning of existence nearby while you struggled to determine whether a particular fragment said Nicias or Nicomedes. One interpretation meant exile. The other meant absolutely nothing. No pressure. Around you, crowds shouted predictions, accusations, and occasionally completely unrelated complaints. One elderly citizen spent nearly an hour arguing that the entire process was unnecessary because everyone worth exiling had already become a politician. Nobody listened. They were too busy watching you sort pottery. It was difficult not to feel slightly disappointed with humanity. Somewhere, brilliant thinkers were exploring ethics, science, and mathematics. Meanwhile, hundreds of adults had gathered to watch another adult organize broken pieces of clay. Civilization was truly a remarkable achievement. As the afternoon continued, another responsibility arrived. A wealthy merchant had sponsored a public festival, and organizers needed someone trustworthy to supervise the distribution of free food. Trustworthy, unfortunately, meant available. Before you could object, you found yourself standing beside large baskets of bread while citizens formed lines that immediately dissolved into arguments. Ancient Greeks loved philosophy, but they loved free food even more. Every person believed they deserved a larger portion than everyone else. Every person had a reason. Veterans claimed military service entitled them to extra bread. Merchants argued their taxes funded the event. Farmers insisted nobody worked harder than they did. One man attempted to justify receiving 3 portions because he was thinking for 2 people. You were uncertain whether that was profound or ridiculous. Either way, he received 1 portion. The resulting complaint lasted 20 minutes. You learned quickly that no matter how fairly food was distributed, someone would feel personally insulted by the outcome. Entire debates erupted over loaf size. Friendships appeared to end over olives. A philosopher delivered an unexpected lecture about justice while waiting in line for cheese. The lecture was longer than the line itself. By sunset, you understood why so many historical records focus on wars and kings. Nobody wanted to spend centuries remembering arguments about bread distribution. Yet those arguments revealed something fascinating. Behind every famous civilization existed ordinary people worrying about ordinary things. Hunger, fairness, reputation, convenience, the same concerns that follow humanity through every century. The festival continued into the evening, and your duties shifted once again. This time, organizers instructed you to patrol the marketplace after dark. Not as a soldier, not as a guard. Simply as someone responsible for ensuring vendors packed their stalls properly before leaving. It sounded easy until you realized merchants possessed an almost supernatural ability to disappear whenever responsibility appeared. Some vanished immediately. Others claimed they were just finishing one last transaction and remained there for another hour. One trader insisted his stall was already packed despite standing directly beside an enormous pile of unpacked goods. Another argued that packing would disrupt the natural balance of the marketplace. You strongly suspected he simply did not want to do the work. Night settled over Athens as torches flickered along narrow streets. The crowds gradually faded, replaced by quieter sounds. Distant conversations, footsteps against stone, the occasional bark of a dog investigating something none of its business. For the first time all day, the city felt peaceful. Then a drunken poet attempted to climb a statue while reciting verses about destiny. Peace ended immediately. You spent the next 30 minutes convincing him that destiny would still exist tomorrow and did not require climbing public monuments. Surprisingly, the argument worked. Ancient Greece produced many great intellectual achievements, but sometimes the most important skill was persuading intoxicated people not to injure themselves. As midnight approached, exhaustion settled into your bones. You had counted votes, distributed food, supervised merchants, and prevented at least one unnecessary statue-related accident. None of these tasks would appear in history books. Future generations would remember philosophers discussing wisdom and generals winning battles. Nobody would remember the person who spent an entire evening explaining to citizens why receiving 1 olive fewer than their neighbor did not constitute a political conspiracy. Yet as you finally sat beneath the stars overlooking Athens, a realization slowly emerged. Great civilizations were not built solely by famous individuals. They survived because countless ordinary people performed countless ordinary jobs every day. Someone counted, someone cleaned, someone organized, someone solved small problems before they became large ones. History celebrated extraordinary achievements, but daily life depended upon invisible work. And tomorrow morning, while philosophers prepared speeches and politicians planned debates, You would wake before sunrise and return to another collection of strange responsibilities that somehow kept the city running. Ancient Greece may have been the birthplace of democracy, philosophy, and scientific thought. But from where you were sitting, it was also a place where civilization depended heavily on tired people doing very peculiar jobs and hoping nobody noticed how close everything always seemed to chaos. The next morning begins long before the city is fully awake. The streets of Athens are quiet except for a few merchants dragging carts over uneven stone roads and the occasional rooster that seems personally offended by the existence of sleep. You rise from a bed that feels less like furniture and more like a punishment invented by someone with strong opinions about comfort. Your back complains immediately. Your legs aren't thrilled either. But ancient Greece has little interest in your physical condition. The city is already moving, and if you're not moving with it, you're falling behind. Today, your assignment seems simple enough. You are responsible for helping manage a public gathering in the Agora, the bustling heart of Athens, where citizens meet to trade, argue, gossip, debate philosophy, and occasionally accomplish something productive by accident. By the time you arrive, the square is already filling with people. Merchants are setting up stalls. Fishermen are advertising catches that look significantly smaller than their descriptions. And politicians are warming up their voices like actors preparing for a performance. Everyone appears to have somewhere important to be and something important to say. Whether either of those things is actually true remains questionable. At first, the atmosphere feels almost pleasant. Sunlight reflects off white stone buildings. Fresh bread drifts through the air. Citizens greet each other with animated conversations. Then the debates begin. One man complains about taxes. Another complains about the man complaining about taxes. A third citizen joins the argument, despite having no idea what anyone is discussing. Within minutes, a crowd forms. Ancient Greece may have invented philosophy, but it also perfected the art of turning minor disagreements into public entertainment. Your responsibility is to keep pathways clear and prevent arguments from blocking commercial activity. In theory, this sounds reasonable. In reality, it means constantly asking passionate Athenians to stop standing in the middle of roads while explaining why everyone else is wrong. The success rate is not encouraging. Every time you clear one area, another debate appears somewhere else. It's like trying to stop waves from reaching a beach. As the morning progresses, a new challenge emerges. A traveling storyteller arrives from a distant region and immediately attracts a large audience. People gather around to hear tales of heroes, monsters, distant kingdoms, and impossible adventures. Normally, this would be harmless entertainment. Unfortunately, the crowd grows so large that nearby merchants begin complaining. Customers can no longer reach their stalls. One vendor insists the storyteller is destroying the local economy. Another claims the stories contain inaccurate information about mythology. A third simply seems angry that someone else is receiving attention. You attempt to mediate the situation, which quickly teaches you an important lesson. Never place a storyteller, a merchant, and a philosopher in the same argument. The storyteller exaggerates everything. The merchant wants compensation. The philosopher questions the definition of compensation itself. 20 minutes later, nobody remembers the original issue. Somehow, they're now debating whether dragons would pay taxes if they existed. You are no closer to solving anything. The afternoon heat arrives with brutal efficiency. The same sun that looked beautiful during sunrise now feels determined to melt the entire city. The marble buildings reflect warmth from every direction. Dust rises from busy streets. Citizens search for shade wherever they can find it. You continue moving through the agora, checking stalls and helping resolve disputes. Most conflicts are harmless. Someone believes they received incorrect change. Someone else insists their goat is being unfairly criticized. One man spends nearly half an hour accusing another man of copying his beard style. Ancient Greece produced extraordinary intellectual achievements, yet somehow beard-related arguments remain surprisingly common. You begin to understand why historians focus on famous events. The average day contains far too many discussions about livestock and facial hair. By late afternoon, you are assigned to assist near the docks. Goods arrive constantly from different regions. Olive oil, wine, pottery, textiles, spices, and countless other products move through the port in a steady stream. The operation is impressive, organized, and far more complicated than most citizens realize. Ships arrive carrying valuable cargo. Workers unload crates. Merchants negotiate prices. Scribes record transactions. Everyone performs a specific role. Your task involves helping verify deliveries and keeping pathways clear. For a brief moment, you feel involved in something genuinely important. Trade fuels the economy. Goods connect distant cultures. Entire industries depend on smooth operations. Then a crate of fish breaks open. Suddenly, dozens of workers are chasing escaped seafood across a dock while shouting contradictory instructions. A seagull steals part of the cargo. Two merchants argue about responsibility. The fish seem remarkably unconcerned by the situation. Civilization once again reveals itself as a fragile arrangement held together by exhausted people improvising solutions. As evening approaches, the city begins preparing for a religious festival scheduled for the following day. Decorations appear throughout the streets. Priests organize ceremonial items. Musicians rehearse performances. Citizens discuss plans with increasing excitement. Festivals are among the highlights of public life. They provide entertainment, community, and opportunities to temporarily forget daily responsibilities. Unfortunately, festivals also require enormous amounts of preparation. Someone must arrange seating. Someone must coordinate performers. Someone must ensure supplies arrive on time. Today, that someone seems to include you. For the next several hours, you help move benches, organize equipment, and answer questions from people who assume you possess information you definitely do not have. One citizen asks where a particular ceremony will occur. Another asks whether rain is expected tomorrow. A third asks if the gods prefer specific flower arrangements. You answer the first question honestly, guess on the second, and wisely avoid the third. Night finally falls across Athens. Torches illuminate streets with flickering orange light. The daytime crowds gradually disappear. Restaurants and taverns become the center of activity. Music drifts through narrow alleys. Laughter echoes from open courtyards. After an exhausting day, you consider heading home immediately. Then, a supervisor informs you of one final responsibility. A wealthy family is hosting a banquet and requires additional staff to help manage guests. Apparently, your ability to survive chaos has become professionally recognized. The banquet is magnificent by local standards. Tables overflow with food. Wine flows freely. Guests discuss politics, philosophy, literature, and occasionally topics They actually understand. At first, everything remains civilized. Then the wine begins affecting decision-making. Conversations become louder. Opinions become stronger. One guest attempts to explain astronomy using a loaf of bread as a visual aid. Another insists he could defeat a mythological hero in single combat if given proper preparation. A third begins singing. Nobody asked him to sing. Hours pass. The atmosphere shifts from sophisticated gathering to controlled disorder. You move between tables, solving minor problems before they become major ones. A cup spills. A chair breaks. Someone becomes convinced they have discovered a revolutionary political theory, despite simply repeating ideas that already exist. The evening grows increasingly absurd. Yet beneath the chaos, something interesting emerges. These people are not legendary figures from history books. They are ordinary individuals, sharing meals, telling stories, making mistakes, and trying to enjoy life. The famous image of ancient Greece often focuses on greatness. Great thinkers, great leaders, great achievements. The reality includes all those things, but it also includes spilled wine, bad singing, and arguments about subjects nobody fully understands. By the time you finally leave the banquet, the city is quiet once again. The moon hangs above rooftops. Cool air replaces the heat of the day. Your feet ache, your shoulders ache. You're fairly certain parts of your body ache that shouldn't even be capable of aching. Yet as you walk through nearly empty streets, you can't help noticing how alive the city feels, even in silence. Tomorrow, philosophers will teach students. Merchants will open shops. Politicians will debate policies. Sailors will arrive with cargo from distant shores. Life will continue exactly as it always has. Most people will never notice the countless small tasks happening behind the scenes. The benches that appeared before festivals. The disputes resolved before they became fights. The deliveries organized before shortages occurred. History remembers grand achievements, but daily life depends on ordinary work. And somewhere between the famous speeches and legendary battles, people like you quietly keep everything moving forward, one strange day at a time. The following morning begins with something unusual. Silence. No shouting merchants. No political debates echoing through the streets. No philosophers attempting to explain the universe before breakfast. For a brief moment, lying on your thin mattress and staring at the ceiling, you think perhaps the city has finally decided to rest. Then a loud knocking sound rattles your door hard enough to nearly stop your heart. The illusion ends immediately. Athens has not become peaceful. Athens has simply found a new way to create problems. You open the door and discover a messenger waiting outside with the expression of a man delivering responsibilities to someone else, which, unfortunately, is exactly what he is doing. A large religious celebration is beginning today, and additional workers are needed near the main temple. Before you can invent an excuse, the messenger has already handed you instructions and disappeared into the street. Ancient Greece may have invented democracy, but responsibility always seems to vote for you whether you participate or not. The city is already alive when you arrive. Thousands of citizens fill the roads leading towards the temple. Vendors sell food from temporary stalls. Musicians tune instruments. Children race through crowds with the kind of energy normally associated with small natural disasters. Priests move through the gathering with solemn expressions, attempting to maintain order while surrounded by people who appear determined to ignore the concept entirely. Your task is simple in theory. Guide visitors, answer questions, and prevent congestion near ceremonial areas. The first problem appears within minutes. A visitor asks where a particular ritual will take place. You answer confidently. 10 minutes later, another official informs you that the location changed earlier that morning. The visitor returns angry. You apologize. 5 minutes after that, the location changes again. By midday, nobody is entirely sure where anything is happening anymore. Citizens wander from one side of the complex to the other, carrying offerings, asking questions, and receiving different answers from every person they meet. You begin to suspect that confusion itself may be part of the ceremony. As the festival grows larger, so do the challenges. One section of the crowd becomes convinced they are standing in the wrong